Everybody, good afternoon. So today we're going to be talking about labor rights. We all come from families that do a lot of labor, working class families and all that good stuff. And there's a lot of history behind that. And then also in contemporary times, the issues that we deal with regards to labor and working class families. So here with us today, we have Jessica Arciniega and Ana Rosa Rizo-Centino. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jessica first, and we'll have her speak first. And it might be easier for you all when you start to have your timer on for about 20 minutes if you want to set that up. That way it kind of gives you a heads up so that we can go into Q&A with students right after that, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you first, Jessica. Hold on just a second. All right, y'all. So Jessica Arciniega is an Assistant General Counsel for the State of California's Agricultural Labor Relations Board. She became an attorney through the State of California's Law Office Study Program. Upon her graduation from Pitzer College with a bachelor's degree in political science, she worked as a labor organizer. Welcome, hermana. So happy to have you here. Happy to see you. Happy to see you as well, Ana Rosa. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you first, Jessica, and then Ana Rosa, when it's your turn, I'll give you a proper introduction. Sale?
Sounds good.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Hope you guys are all doing good. Vero, is there something specific that you want me to talk about, or 2 or 3 specific things?
Just really wanting, well, if you want to talk about the work that you focus on in general, because I know that you mostly work with farm workers, is that correct?
Right.
Yeah, so maybe just what the work that you do in general and maybe some of the larger issues that folks are facing and what, even if you want to give an example of some of the work that you've done in the past, any cases, I don't know if you're able to do that or not, but whatever you feel you're able to share with regards to that would be great.
Sounds good. So my name is Jessica, and like Professor Veronica said, I work for the Agricultural Labor Relations Board. It's an office through the state of California. So I'm an attorney for the state of California. And we're kind of like a prosecuting office if we find, after investigating, that there's a violation of the Labor Act. So I guess I'll start off by saying that all of the work that I do is with farm workers or growers, agricultural employers, or farm worker unions. Our office is kind of like a neutral place for any of those people to allege that one of the other parties is violating their rights. And sometimes that can be workers against unions. It can be unions against employers. It can be employers against unions. And so our office is like a neutral party in that we receive these complaints and then we conduct investigations. My office is in Oxnard for those who are tuning in from Ventura County. And we've had an office here in Oxnard since about 2012. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this Farm Worker Agricultural Labor Relations Act, because it's unique to California. So in the 1930s, around there was a federal law that was passed that gave all workers the right to form a union, the right to join together to try and collectively bargain with their employer to try and improve their working conditions. And in the 1930s, when that law was passed for the entire country, farm workers were left out of the act. And so that meant that farm workers didn't have those rights. There was no law that gave them the right to form a union, to collectively bargain with their employer. And a lot of efforts by farm workers, you know, from the 1930s, probably before that on, really didn't end up with workers having the right to actually not be fired for striking or to not be recalled because they tried to organize. And so in California in the 1960s and the 1970s, there was a farm worker movement that still exists today. And you guys maybe have covered this in your classes, but part of that movement was to organize farm workers so that they could have collective power and they could have bargaining power. And in the 1970s, part of that movement was to have the Agricultural Labor Relations Act passed in California. So it's a state law. It's not throughout the country. And still to this day, I guess we're saying 45 years later, farm workers in many other states don't have these rights today. They exist in California because the farm worker movement and Governor Brown and other legislatures and other folks who fought got this law passed. And so in 1975, when the law was passed, it mimics a little bit the federal law in that it gives workers the right to organize, farm workers, the right to organize, the right to form a union, the right to, once they have a union, their employer is obligated to bargain with their representative. And that's something that enables them to start to negotiate wage increases, medical benefits, treatment, other rights that you don't typically have in the state of California without a union contract representation. And so, 40 some years later, I work for this office, and our job is to ensure that this act is upheld. And so, being in Ventura County in a agricultural community, we are busy, and we do a lot of this work for our county, as well as farm workers who are in Santa Barbara County who reach out to us from Santa Maria. And before we had offices down in Indio, sometimes we would go down that way to San Diego County. But now we have an office down there that's staffed. So my job as an attorney is to investigate the charges that are filed and then make decisions about whether we think that there's a violation of the law. And if we do, then we would issue a complaint, and we'd go to a hearing, and we'd go before a judge, and then the judge would hear the evidence and make a determination. So I was going to share one of our cases with you. Okay. And then hopefully there'll be time for questions. And hopefully by sharing the case, I'm able to share a little bit more about what the law means for workers in California. So this is a case that was decided in 2018, and it's a Smith packing. It's a published decision, which means that there was a hearing that was held. The judge made his decision, and then the employer appealed it, said they thought the judge got it wrong. And then it went to our board, which is a board of members in Sacramento, and the board upheld the judge's decision, affirming that there was a violation of the law, and the judge decided the matter correctly. So the central issue in Smith packing, and this is what a lot of our cases are about, is whether or not an employer retaliates against farm workers who have somehow joined together to try and improve their working conditions. And a lot of what we see in Ventura County and Santa Barbara County right now is not so much union activity, which is a protected activity. So it's not so much workers joining together to form a union or to support a union or try to get a union at their workplace. It looks more like workers joining together on their own without any union, because there's some workplace issue, from my experience, that they really are not willing to deal with anymore. And if you have family members who work in the fields, from my experience, I've found that it really takes a lot, and it really takes a long amount of time for workers to be dealing with something when they finally decide that they no longer want to stay quiet about it. And there's a variety of reasons why that happens. I'm sure you guys, that have that family experience, or maybe you worked yourselves in the fields, or you work with farm workers. There's a lot of layers of reasons why workers don't want to speak up and why they don't want to come forward, even when they know that these rights exist. Even when we've talked to them and they've called us and we've told them, you have the right to do this. The biggest fear, immediately, is that they're going to be terminated. And if they're not terminated immediately, the next fear is that they won't be rehired because it's seasonal work. And so they depend on being able to return to the employer if they choose to continue working there. So those are some big fears. And, being from other countries, there's not a strong familiarity with the laws here or how our systems work. Their documentation status may also influence the way that they feel about interacting with government agencies like the state of California. And our political climate, the rhetoric that happens, also influences I would say, in my experience, the degree to which people feel safe, safe about speaking out, safe about identifying themselves, safe about pushing back against injustice. So this case in Smith Packing had to decide whether or not workers were terminated for engaging in this activity together. And they were lettuce harvesters, and they had an operation in Salinas and in Santa Maria. And it was a crew of 18 workers. And in this crew, most often workers are paid piece rate. So they're paid by the amount that they produce per day. And that's where I think farm workers really feel like they can make more money, more than the minimum wage, at the expense of, really hard physical labor. So in the lettuce harvesting, just like celery and other products that are kind of more veggies, there's oftentimes like a group earning. And so the group works together to try and produce as many bins as possible, and then divide up that money that they or the employer, takes the total earnings, total number of bins times the price of the bin, and then that's a total earning, and then they split it evenly amongst the workers. So oftentimes if you drive by or you have a chance to see, there's just like real, almost harmonious workflow happening, because everybody's doing their job as efficiently as possible to get as many bins completed. They all benefit. So in the lettuce crew, there was cutters, there was tractor operators, there was cleaners, there was foremen. The cutters would place the lettuce on the conveyor belt on the tractor, and the cleaners would inspect it, and then the lettuce would go on the belt, and then it would go through a wash tunnel and get inspected again, and then it's placed into a packing bin. So the lettuce that didn't meet the quality standards had to be discarded, right? Because there's also very large pressure on growers from distributors, like big distributors like Costco and Walmart and folks like that, that want them to ensure that they're meeting these high quality standards, so that those retailers are not in danger of someone getting sick and then suing them. And so any of the lettuce that didn't meet the quality control standard had to be discarded. And in August, the cutters noticed that on the conveyor belt, the tractor belt, there was some teeth that were broken, kind of like things that would hold up, the lettuce as it's going. And the teeth help guide the lettuce up to the belt, and it doesn't let it fall off the belt. So if the lettuce falls on the ground, they can't pick it back up and put it on the belt, because now it's considered, tarnished. And so that's essentially lost lettuce that's already been harvested. And so the cutters told the foreman about the teeth that were broken on the conveyor belt, and the foreman told them that a new belt was being ordered. And so the workers continued working that day on Thursday. And then they worked the next day on Friday. Well, on Saturday, 10 cutters stopped working because of the broken or missing teeth on the belt, and the lettuce kept falling off. And then the problem was, worse by then, because it had been Thursday, Friday, and now Saturday. And so the cutters refused to resume working until a supervisor went to discuss the matter with them. And that's one of the facets of the law that we uphold, is that workers can nonviolently withhold their labor in a group to try and negotiate, or to try and speak up about the conditions that they want to improve. That's a protected activity. That's something that the state of California, the law that we enforce, protects workers and allows them to do. And so they did that. And they said that they wanted to discuss this with their supervisor. So the foreman called the supervisor, and then the supervisor went out to the field, and he met with the cutters, and he agreed to pay them 10 extra bins to compensate for the lettuce that was falling off the belt, because the working conditions, impacting their wages. And so the workers continued cutting. They went back to work. And then the foreman told the workers that the owner was going to meet with them at 2:00 that afternoon, and then later told them he wasn't going to meet with them, but he would meet with them on Monday. So on Monday morning, the owner's brother arrived to meet with the cutters. And our office, I didn't handle this case before hearing it with my colleagues, but our office's position was that the cutters were trying to explain the problem to him about the belt and the broken teeth, but he didn't want to listen. And so the brother of the owner told the cutters that he wouldn't pay them anymore for the lettuce that was falling off the belt. That wasn't. Asked them if they were going to work and stated that there were other companies they could go to if they did not want to return to work. So that's what he told them. Now, I'm gonna take a quick little poll just to try and engage you guys a little. It's kind of awkward just talking this whole time. But maybe you could just show with the raise of your hands, does anybody think that when the owner's brother said, or asked them if they were going to work and stated that if they weren't, there were other companies they could go to. Does anyone think that he was firing them? I see one nod head. There's one person nodding their head.
And then please keep your chat open, everyone, so you can be
Okay.
or unmute.
Okay.
You see the hands raising?
And so at the hearing, brother, to be determined. So I'll keep going with the decision, and then you guys who thought yes can feel like you're ready to go litigate cases for farm workers. Just kidding. So the owner's brother testified at the hearing that he said, there's a job for you. It's your decision to stay. It's your decision to go somewhere else, but it's your decision. And so the really interesting part of this case is that the judge and the board who upheld the judge's decision found that there's no distinction in saying you could go somewhere else, like what the workers alleged that the owner's brother said, or there are other companies. That essentially saying either one of those things is giving the same message. And in the decision, the board said there's no distinction between the two. So then one of the workers asked, are you firing us? And he said, we'll go get our checks right now. And the owner's brother told them they could get their checks from the office or meet somewhere that afternoon when the checks were ready. So at this point, anybody who didn't think that the brother fired them when he told them the first time, does anybody now think that the owner's brother fired them? Let's see anybody's camera on. Okay, so a couple of folks with their hands up. Okay, and so then the cutters left and they went to the office because they wanted to talk to the owner. So workers are at the office and the staff, didn't really know what to do. The cutters waited outside for the owner, and then the staff called the owner's brother, and the owner's brother told the person in the staff to cut the checks for the workers. And so the owner held a meeting. He came and he held a meeting with the workers, and they told him about the equipment. They told him that the belt was broken and they wanted to get fixed. They complained also about an inspector that was inspecting the quality of the produce, and that they also said that the foreman didn't provide drinking water to them one day. And so the owner told the workers that he needed them to figure things out with his brother, and that whatever his brother said was the final word. So the final word, to the workers was there wasn't going to be any extra pay for the lettuce that was falling off the belt. Because at this point, the belt wasn't fixed. They could stay or they can go to another company. And so the cutters left the meeting and they collected their paychecks. And the next day, they filed a charge with our office. The charge is kind of the initial paperwork that workers can file to say, I think something happened here that's against the law, and then we'll start the investigation process. So 1 week later, the company offered them reinstatement. And the test here that the judge and the board had to decide was whether or not the workers were discharged, because the words "you're fired" were never used. And the standard, or what the law looks at in these types of cases, is the reasonable inference that the employees could draw from the language used by the employer. So the law states that a discharge occurs when an employer's conduct or words would reasonably cause employees to believe they were discharged. And they focus that analysis from the perspective of the employee, not the employer. So, the company argued no firing had occurred because they were really hinging on the fact that the owner's brother gave the workers a choice, or that it was their decision if they wanted to continue working or not. But the ultimate effect, this is part of the decision, so it's a public document. The ultimate effect of the words is the same, whether it's phrased more explicitly, like an ultimatum, or in less clear terms, suggesting they are free to choose what they want to do. The board found that either way, the message is the same to workers. So basically, the message that the board talked about is that you have to abandon the exercise of your rights right now, you're joined together, right, in a collective action trying to improve your working conditions, you either have to abandon that activity and go back to work under the conditions that the employer dictates, or you no longer have a job. Okay, so that was the company's response to the exercise of their rights, which was stopping work to try and get this problem addressed. And so the board decided that the termination was unlawful, that our office had shown through the hearing that the workers had engaged in this activity together, the employer knew about the activity, and that there was a relationship between that activity and the ultimate action of what the employer did in response to their activity. That is what happened in Smith Packing. And the remedies, very quickly, because I think I'm very at the end of my time right here. The remedies are that that our office can enforce if once the judge and the board decided that it was an unlawful termination of the workers, is to rescind the discharge notices and expunge them from their files, to offer them reinstatement if they hadn't, although they had already offered them reinstatement, and then to pay them back pay. So the back pay is monetary compensation that is based on any losses they actually incurred. So it goes from like the date of when they fired them until when they offered them their job back, minus their earnings from any other job they were working at. So there's no windfall or any type of hurtful or punishing fines or monies. It's just the potential loss. So had they gone, when they went to work somewhere else, because most often when workers are terminated, they immediately look for work and have to start working somewhere else out of necessity. If they earned less at that other job than they would have earned had they continued working and not been fired, then they're paid the difference for that, or that's what the order is, to compensate them for those losses. So it's supposed to be, it's called a make whole. It's supposed to make them whole back to the position they would have been in had they not been terminated. The other remedies that are not monetary is that our office goes out into the fields. We read a notice, which is a paper, to all the workers about what their rights are under this law in the state of California. We answer questions. We talk to them about what happened in this case. We post up that notice for 60 days. And then we also have the employer mail them the notice and give the notice to any new employee for like a 12-month period. And then once all of that has been done, our office verifies that the employer did, compensate them and did everything that they were supposed to do, and then we can close the matter. So I think I'm going to end it there. I think that's my time. And then you can ask me questions now or after Ana Rosa. So how's that, Vero?
Yeah, that's great. No, we're going to go ahead and do your portion of the Q&A now. So students, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute so that you can ask your questions. Or if you have any comments. And I do just want to remind everyone that there's a question in the chat. Jessica, are you able to read it?
But I just opened it, but let me open it again.
Okay. I do just want to remind everyone that California is the 5th largest economy on the planet, okay? And among the top industries in California is agriculture. And if you know anything about business, is that your largest expense as a business is going to be salaries, your employees, right? Paying people. And so to have a much larger profit, you need to have a very small number of employees or pay them very little, okay? So you can see how this is among the richest industries, okay, in the world. And these are people that are working for hardly anything, backbreaking work all day long, okay? And I did pose a question on the chat, just kind of asking you all, trying to connect it to maybe the history of your own families. If any of you come from farm working families, I know that I do, and I grew up picking strawberries with my family, so I know how hard that work is. And I remember seeing my parents and my siblings coming home just full of mud and their hands just totally muddy and cut and swollen sometimes, and how exhausting that work was. And then to have to work so many hours, day after day after day after day, and still be broke is a problem, and meanwhile we're making the state of California extremely rich, among the richest in the whole world. So there are all of these injustices, right? So I'm just really happy that there are people like Jessica out there fighting for their rights. So I appreciate you so much, Hermana. But yeah, let's go ahead and see what questions we have in the chat. So from Cameron, she's asking, have you noticed a rise in cases since the pandemic has started? Legal cases, I'm assuming, Cameron? Has that changed at all?
You know, it's interesting. I think it's, for a while, there was a little bit of a decrease in the, you know, we get constant calls. So, but maybe like in the number of charges being filed, because I think the whole world just didn't know what was going on and everybody was kind of at a standstill a little bit. We did get some cases up in Santa Maria that are under investigation still. I don't have like results to share with you, but some cases related to COVID. So some workers, you know, at another vegetable producer up in Santa Maria actually complained as a group because they were given kind of mixed signals about what they should have been doing. Well, let me say this. The charge alleges that they were, you know, told on one day to socially distance. That was due to some type of outside inspector, someone coming, and these are allegations. We haven't decided yet what we think actually happened. We're still investigating it. But then they allege that on other days they were told that, you know, to continue working together, closely together, to produce, to be fast. And so they had some issues with those instructions and with the pay that was associated with it. And so they allege that they were fired or bringing that issue up to their employer. And in that case, the employer did offer them their jobs back once the workers filed that charge. So that's one that was kind of related to COVID. And I think that, you know, if anything, it just made it a little bit more difficult for farm workers to kind of contact us because everybody moved into like a Zoom world. And I don't think that that necessarily transferred so easily. I think farm workers, you know, a lot of them have phones. And so there was an ability to call. But what I found in my experience most often is that farm workers like to just go to your office and show up and talk to you in person, which we know and we're fine with. There's no, you know, outside of COVID, there's no problem with that. But we were also deemed to be, you know, sheltering in place as state of California employees. So we were all working remotely. And we just had to figure it out. We just had to find ways for folks to connect with us. And so we did that. And so I think that's, what are some ways we can get involved to bring more attention to this matter? You know, our office has an outreach department now, and we have some folks who are working on like food distribution, and along with the food distribution, trying to provide information. And so I think for our office, you know, the biggest form of help or assistance is really like accessibility. Again, because you can say like, oh, the state of California, and for us that can mean something very different than it can mean for others. And so it's not always like a welcoming or a comfortable or a safe connotation. And so I think that our office has really understood that our relationships with community organizations, schools, clinics, all kinds of other organizations that serve farm workers or that help them, by them distributing information and sharing what our office does and what the law dictates for them, has, I think, really helped to bridge workers who then maybe if things are bad enough, I guess, or they decide to speak up, will decide to reach out or ask one of the people at a community organization to reach out to us. So that might be a way.
There's a question from Gus Melgoza. Since that lawsuit, the lawsuit that you shared with us, have you noticed a difference in companies being more cautious about making sure their equipment is working properly at all times in an effort to avoid similar situations from happening?
It's a mixed bag, you know. I think there's a lot of employers who, you know, are handling things and probably wouldn't have allowed that to happen And, you know, the lawsuits also, like, for example, that was in Santa Maria, it's a published decision, it's a public document, anybody could read it. And maybe, I mean, I don't know if it was distributed among other vegetable employers, you know, producers to warn them to take care of, you know, problems more. There's a lot of industry groups, like Strawberry Commission, there's Vegetable Producers Association. So they have a lot of means of communication. The equipment working, you know, it's going to happen. It's going to happen in the fields. And oftentimes folks, you know, find a way to make it work until they don't, or until they can't. And so those are some of the complaints that we get, and some of them are met really expediently, and employers repair the problems or stop the equipment, and they have another, you know, another new piece of equipment come in. So it's really hard for me to say if I, you know, whether there's a difference or not. Our region varies a lot too. We have a lot of strawberry harvesting in Ventura County with some vegetables. And then in Santa Maria, there's a whole other environment, you know, a whole other landscape. And I think what we do know is that when we go out to the fields and talk to workers and we're able to share information, oftentimes when someone else call us or reach out to us, they'll say, oh, I was at that field like a year ago when you went to go talk, or, oh, somebody that I know, a relative or, you know, compadre, like gave me your phone number and told me to call to see if you could help. So oftentimes we're also like a portal to other state agencies. If it doesn't have to, if it's not something that we handle, we try and hook them up with the agency that would address an issue. Like Cal OSHA, that would be like a Cal OSHA issue maybe when there's faulty equipment.
Ernesto, you want to go ahead and unmute, ask your question?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering how someone gets into like your line of work, and if there's like what qualifications you need, or like if there's still a high demand for these jobs, for this, you know, type of help for these farm workers.
Yeah, I mean, I can share personally, you know, and advocate also, because I think that in the field of law, bilingual, culturally competent lawyers are direly needed.
Yeah.
Whether it's for farm workers or other monolingual Spanish-speaking workforces, immigrant workforces. I would even go as far to say, you know, for labor rights. So my quick story is that I graduated with my BA and I went to go work for the Farm Workers Union in Watsonville. And I was there for a while. And then I was moved here to Ventura County. I'm from LA originally. And so I came to Ventura County to work, and really fell in love with the distance to LA, you know, being shorter than being up north, as well as just the area. And I was working as an organizer, and one of the workers who we were working with was fired. And so the union hired an attorney who's local here in Ventura County, excuse me, to represent the worker to get their job back. And I started working closely with her because I was kind of the person in touch with the workers, and she was the attorney litigating the case for this firing. And it turned out that she had become a lawyer when she worked for the Farm Workers Union, you know, in the 80s. And the interesting part, I guess, that I want to share is that in California, there's a program called the Law Office Study Program, which is a program that you can do in lieu of going to law school. And so this attorney had become a lawyer that way. And when her and I met, we started talking about me becoming a lawyer that way. And, you know, I'd been out of my undergrad for a while. And so I had contemplated going back to school, but I wasn't really clear on what I wanted to do. And she offered to apprentice me. It's an apprentice program, the way that attorneys became lawyers back in the day before law school existed. And so she encouraged me, and it sounded really cool and exciting. And she was a really exciting example of an attorney, you know, who had been an organizer, who turned a lawyer, and who was doing work that I was enjoying doing. And so that's what I did. And it's a 4-year program. And so I did that program. And so essentially you're eligible to take the bar exam. And the license is to practice law. And so once you pass the bar exam, you get your license, and then you can practice law in California. So that's what I did. And yeah, I would encourage folks to do it. it's a really challenging, you got to be really self-disciplined, but very rewarding, especially since I knew what kind of law I wanted to practice mainly. And after I got my license, I worked at a civil litigation firm doing plaintiff's work, which is like, I did a lot of workers for wage and hour issues, and then never really envisioned that I was going to work for the state. But the opportunity, I guess, came when they opened an office here in Ventura County. And so I said, well, let me go give it a try and see. And I think it's been, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, 2012 maybe, yeah. So, and our office has grown, so that's exciting too. So yeah, if you're interested, I highly encourage it. Vero can give out my my personal email if folks want to reach out and get more information. I'm always open to talking to people.
And then somebody's asking what the name of the law program was called again.
So if you look, like you have to Google Law Office Study Program, and the State Bar of California has a section in there that talks about the Law Office Study Program. You have to find your supervising attorney. They don't offer you attorneys. You have to find that person who's willing to mentor you for 4 years. And then there's all these, guidelines and regulations on reporting that you have to do to the State Bar. It's the Law Office Study Program.
And then we have one last question for you before we transition over to our next guest speaker. Isabella, if you want to go ahead and unmute.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
I when you said you worked with OSHA sometimes, how closely do you work with OSHA? Because I know sometimes it does overlap into where OSHA takes care of agriculture versus you guys.
Yeah, it's all, we're all state of California offices. So we're all state employees. And it's just a matter of jurisdiction, right? So we don't have to be exclusive. So for example, if workers have a complaint about a faulty piece of equipment or a danger or a risk on their job site, they can go to OSHA and ask for them to come out and inspect and look at it. But they can also file a charge with our office if they've complained about it and then they believe that they've been retaliated against. So they're not mutually exclusive. The little challenge or difficulty is that in Ventura County, there's not a lot of actual employees physically located here from those other offices. So we are, and oftentimes workers who prefer to talk to a person in person will come to us because we're here. They can find us, they can knock on our door. Whereas OSHA might be in LA or Van Nuys or up north, and they have to call this 800 number or, and that's fine. I mean, we can connect them and we try our best to connect them. But it's just different because they don't have a door to go knock on. And so we really try and create good, strong relationships with other state offices so that when there are those times that workers want to access an office, we try our best to kind of bridge that gap and hand them off to somebody. So it's not just a 1-800 number. Sometimes it happens to just be that because they're overloaded, because they're not just agriculture. OSHA is every workplace.
Yeah.
And so those offices are super slammed sometimes. And, we try.
Yeah. Brittany, you have your hand up. Did you want to ask something? Or is that from before?
Yeah, I was going to ask, I know that there's certain programs, I think here in Oxnard, I heard of one over the summer. It's a program for migrants to come and work in the agricultural field. And then they also get housing. But over the summer, there was a protest for workers' rights that had the housing because I believe they started getting COVID. I'm not really sure how all that works. So I was just wondering about your input on that issue.
Yeah, I think I remember. So the program is called H-2A, and essentially it's a form of a visa where single workers, and they're mostly males, can come to work in the United States temporarily. And so the quick, part of it is that the employer who's requesting to bring workers on this type of visa has to demonstrate to the federal government that there's no available domestic workers to do the job. So that's one piece of it. And then once the employers demonstrate there's no available domestic workers to do that job, then they can apply for a certain number of visas. And then they get those visas filled, and those workers can come temporarily to work for that season. And there's a contract that's all written out, and it's regulated by the Department of Labor, a federal government agency. And so as part of that program, those employers have to provide housing and transportation and either meals or like a food stipend. And so I think what you're referring to is that there was a COVID outbreak at one of the labor camps where a group of workers that were here on those visas were residing. And you know, I don't know a ton about it. It's not like our jurisdiction had something different happen where they had spoken up and then they felt they were retaliated against, then our office could be involved. Even for workers who are here on those visas, they still have the same rights under this law that we enforce. But from what I learned about it, I think that because there was one here in Ventura County and there was also one in Santa Maria. And what I understood about the one in Ventura County was that the employer quickly linked up with Ventura County Public Health and maybe other agencies in the county to try and assess the situation and then deal with it. Whereas in Santa Maria, the reports we heard there was that didn't happen as quickly, and the workers were actually reaching out to us to figure out what their rights were and what they could do and how they could find out more information, because they were also at like a labor camp area where they told us that they weren't getting good information and they were fearful. And so some more links had to get made in Santa Barbara County, workers to get in contact with folks who could try and address their situation there. That's really all I know.
You know, what's interesting, and I have to point this out so that our viewers on when they see the recording of this, because they can't see our chat, right? So I have to point out the irony of how employers have to prove that they can't find workers here in the States to take care of it before they bring on these guest workers. And meanwhile, there's all this rhetoric out there about how immigrants steal American jobs. But yet you have these employers proving that there are no Americans to take those jobs. So I think that's just really ironic, y'all. So I just want to point that out because there's a lot of rhetoric out there. And what you have to do is you have to read between the lines and you have to see what's really going on out there so that you can see that it's just rhetoric, right? So I just wanted to point that out. But thank you so much, Hermana, for sharing this space with us and for just, sharing your knowledge, your experiences, and, the realities of what's going on out there and the very real issues that our farm workers are dealing with. And, farm workers have a very special place in my heart because that's my family, that's my familia, and as you can see, I have the UFW flag back here. And it's important to me. And, these are the people that keep us fed. Right? These are the people, we take it for granted because we can go to the grocery store or just order food delivered to our house and we have our healthy produce without really thinking about the hands that all of those pieces of produce pass through, right? And the labor, the intense labor that they go through in order for us to be able to eat these nice, healthy salads and meals and whatnot. So I just want you all to think about that and always just, be grateful for that labor. And for making it so that we live in one of the richest states in the world, right? So again, muchísimas gracias, Jessica, for being with us. You're welcome to stay with us and engage in the next part of the conversation. But if you have to go, understandable, but I hope you can stay if you can. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can. 2:45, right? Is your,
yeah.
All right, thank you all.
Okay, so now, con mucho gusto, with much pleasure, I'm going to introduce our next guest speaker, Rosa Rizo-Centino, who has 20 years of organizing experience at local, state, and national levels with labor, students, youth, interfaith, and community organizations. Ana Rosa is the executive director of One Step a la Vez, serving the Fillmore, Santa Paula, and Piru areas of Ventura County, and currently serves as a board member of La Casa de La Raza in Santa Barbara. Ana Rosa also co-hosts a radio show called Que Madre on KZAA 96.5 FM. Check it out, y'all. It's a great show. And she'll be teaching a course on intersectional organizing at UCSB this spring quarter. Ana Rosa, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And I have to say, what an amazing International Women's Day this is, because this is such a full circle moment for me, because both Veronica, your professor, Valadez, and Jessica Arciniega are directly responsible for me becoming an organizer. I was like, damn, these women are amazing. I want to be like them. And so I actually started engaging in the farm worker movement as a student at UC Santa Barbara because of Jessica. She came to our campus and told us about the Pig Sweet mushroom worker strike, and actually brought workers from Pig Sweet to come talk to us about their struggle in the workplace and how important it was for us to support them. So I became kind of like a volunteer boycott coordinator in Santa Barbara County to support the Pig Sweet mushroom workers boycott. And I want to really focus on some critical questions. I don't want to like lecture at you too much, but I think it's important for all of us to think about what labor is valued in this country and what labor is not valued in this country. And I feel like everything that's personal is political. And so my experience growing up, my mom had to work 3 jobs to sustain our family. She was a cafeteria worker at an elementary school. She was also a grocery store worker, and along the way sold like Avon and just whatever she could do to make up, you know, that little bit that was left to pay the bills. So she would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day to cook breakfast, lunch, and dinner for her 5 kids to make sure that we were never lacking anything, even though we couldn't see her. So I unfortunately was not able to see my mom very much as a kid because she was working so much. And so to just think about why is women's work and mothers' work not valued, right? When we are the ones that are often left to sustain our families. And so like work that is feminized is often paid less, whenever it's a role where you're taking care of people, you tend to get paid less than other types of work. And even if you're in the very same job as a man, a lot of times women get paid less than men do. I've had that experience in a couple of positions that I've been in. And it was even with nonprofit organizations who are supposed to be about social justice, right? So we have to ask these critical questions in every space that we're involved in. And I want to talk about rhetoric, right? Because your professor was just talking about the rhetoric and how intentional rhetoric is and the language that's used, right? Because when farm workers are talked about, what's the adjective that's often used? Unskilled labor. If you have ever worked in farm labor, your professor can tell you herself, in farm labor, you know how intense and difficult that work is. It is the furthest thing from unskilled labor, but they use that word to dehumanize people, right? So really think about the language that you hear being referred to us. You know, I'm saying us because I'm saying mostly people of color in this space. You know, we are taught to think that we're criminals, that we're this, that we're that. And it's like, no, we got to take control of our own identities, and nobody can tell us who we are, right? We tell ourselves who we are. Our mothers, our caretakers, our fathers, our siblings, all of those, the people that make up our community, we are seeing every day that they lift up this community, this country. Without people of color, America would go nowhere, literally nowhere. It would stop. So I want to talk about this pandemic, because as terrible as this pandemic has been, it has been an amazing teacher, because it has lifted the veil on a lot of systems that we thought were working for us when we know that they're not. So it has taught us that those workforces that are most disrespected are the ones that are most essential, right? As your professor said up above in the chat, farm workers are essential workers. Grocery store workers are essential workers. You know, and so that's why it's so critical that they have unions, the United Farm Workers, the Farm Labor Organizing Committee, UFCW, the United Food and Commercial Workers, because, you know, if you're in any job and if you've ever had a bad boss and you want to raise an issue and it's just you against the boss's word, it's very hard to get anywhere, right? So that's why you'll hear a term that even Mecha uses, right? La unión hace la fuerza, because when you are united with other workers, then you can actually push forward what needs to happen, whether it's higher salaries, right, living wages. Right now, there's a big struggle for fast food workers to make at least $15 an hour, because otherwise it's just you against the boss. And so you are pretty much at the mercy that your boss will hopefully be a nice person and not a jerk who's going to try to extract every little bit of labor out of you and leave you with nothing left for your family, right? So it's just really important to, if you're in an abusive situation, and actually, even if you're not, I would say every workforce, there should be a union, right? Because that ability to have collective bargaining for a contract that is able to, and if hopefully you're in a union that actually cares about the community too, right? Because there's also some unions that they just care about like the employees, but not necessarily who they're serving, right? So we got to make sure that the unions are like holding up the needs of their workers and at the same time holding up the needs of the community. So how do we get community organizations working with unions to make sure that we're pushing for a more just future for our kids, for our grandkids, for us now? I mean, you'll hear about climate change and how, oh, you know, we want to ensure a future for the coming 7 generations, and we do, but also climate change is having a terrible effect even now. So if you hear about the Green New Deal, I feel like that's a really good avenue to be able to support jobs that have very low carbon footprints, and caretaking jobs are actually low carbon footprint kind of jobs. So teaching, farm workers, you know, all of the people that are most disrespected in our community should be getting raises, should be valued more. And the Green New Deal could actually be a great way of pushing that forward. Have you all heard about the Green New Deal? I'm speaking in this whole little environmental aspect in here because I think it's really important. And I don't plan to talk for the whole 20 minutes because I actually want to hear from you all, you know, if you have any questions. But has anyone heard of the Green New Deal?
And maybe if you can give everyone a summary of, you know, what it is, that would probably help.
So I see Miriam saying somewhat. So basically, we have 11 years to completely turn around the way that we do our, the way we move the world. So right now, oil production and the extraction of oil and the emissions that are affecting our environment are at a critical point where the climate is warming and it's not sustainable for the earth. So if we don't, you know, stop using oil vehicles, if we don't transition to clean energy, we are going to leave a very short window of time for future generations to be able to actually live in a sustainable world. So that's why we got to change everything. So we're talking about ending oil production, but also creating just transition. So when you hear the term just transition, it's so that people who may be employed in the oil industry can actually transition to other kinds of work. For example, solar energy or wind energy. So people would be trained and then still get a good wage, still get, you know, healthcare benefits, still get pensions for transitioning to clean energy. So it's not just talking about the clean energy itself, but the kind of jobs that will be created by this new form of energy. So I think in California, the governor just had I don't know if it was a proclamation or a resolution that as of 2030, no more vehicles that operate by oil, by fuel, will be sold anymore. So that's why we're going to need to have a lot of more, you know, like electric charging stations for EVs, electric vehicles, and so that's kind of the realm. And if you've heard of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she has a 7-minute video, and I'll put it in the chat so that you can watch it on your own time. But it's a really great video, kind of painting what the future could look like under a Green New Deal. And right now we're having house meetings on the Central Coast so that we can talk to people, you know, in there. Right now it's by Zoom because of the fact that we're under COVID, but there are, you know, just like 5 to 10 people that you invite. They could be your friends, your coworkers, and your family. And you talk about, okay, what's happening in our community right now? What issues can we actually address by pushing forward a Green New Deal on the Central Coast, so that it's actually a regional Central Coast Green New Deal instead of just adopting whatever the federal framework is, because the federal framework it's great, but it's not very specific. So we're trying to get more specific here at the local level. And in Santa Barbara County, they've been doing these health meetings for about a year now, and they're kind of getting ready to wrap up and propose something to Santa Barbara County. In Ventura County, we just started on the house meetings, and we're hoping to have about a year of house meetings before we propose something to the Ventura County Board of Supervisors. So yeah, those are some things that I wanted to talk to you all about. But I want to make sure that I leave plenty of time for questions, because I think that's where the magic happens. Because I think as we are talking about these different issues, you know, certain questions might be popping up in your head, and I don't want us to like rush to give you a really fast answer if the answer is more complex than just a few words.
Miriam has her hand up.
Go for it, Miriam.
Hi. So my question is kind of also directed to the professor as well, but I know you had talked about like it is International Women's Day and like being a woman in like the field of like helping other people, and how you talked about how hard it is to be a woman in that position. Well, I guess my question is more like, what kind of advice do you have to other women who are trying to build themselves up to that platform, or not necessarily platform, but that level?
To like organize or get active in your community?
To organize or to do anything, because I know it's like a struggle for, like how you said, not only yourselves, but for the people. And I'm sure it takes like an emotional toll as well.
I'm gonna invite all three of us, including Jessica, to answer this question. Ana Rosa, why don't you go ahead and answer first?
Yeah, I would say just surrounding yourself by your own little support network. So being able to kind of de-stress or vent, right, when times are tough. And also, you know, for me, it's like my self-care stuff is going to the ocean. That's like my happy place where I can just like release my worries and just kind of get energy for the next day. And I think for me, a lot of it was just taking the example, like I said earlier, of people who have started the work before I did. So Jessica, Veronica, Professor Valadez, and just like being inspired, because that inspiration goes a long way, and getting training. I've gone to so many trainings, so I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do now if it wasn't for me like educating myself and going through trainings to help me do the work better, because none of us are perfect and there's always room for improvement. So making sure that we're, you know, training up on the issues that we need to be trained up on in order to effectively represent the people that we're trying to fight for and with, and realizing that we're not empowering them. It's more of a co-powerment situation, right? Because we learn from the people that we're organizing with. It's not like I'm going to come school you, I'm going to come, you know, save you. None of us are saviors. We're like saving ourselves and each other together.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I agree with everything that Ana Rosa just said. And I think it's really important to really look for other women that you feel are going to support you in whatever you do. And that support goes both ways, right? So you really want to surround yourself around other strong, ambitious women, and hold each other up, because it is tough, and you do need time for that self-love and self-care, and just, you know, because we feel things at a deeper level, I think oftentimes, you know, and we analyze things like to death. So that adds on to our emotions, you know, like, oh, but what about this and this and this, and we're connecting things all of the time. But also to not forget our relationship with the natural elements around us, right? With Mother Earth, Mother Nature, you know, the feminine energy of the ocean, of the moon, of the earth itself, and just connect in that way and ground yourself. You know, and those are ways that help us stay strong spiritually and emotionally. But as far as navigating in a man's world, you really have to diversify yourself as far as all the skills that you have to learn to bring to the table so that you're even more competitive, right? So that you have to compete with men for the same jobs, and you have to have a list of other things to be able to compete at the same level, unfortunately. And then you have to know your rights, your contracts, you have to know all of that really, really, really well, so that when there is a wage gap that you're facing, or there is some other kind of issue that you're facing as a woman, that you know your contracts and your rights very, very well, and then that you can approach the matter from that standpoint, right? Because you have to be your own advocate. And then hopefully in the places of employment that you end up, that you do solidify those strong relationships with the other women that work with you, so that you can support each other in that. And that doesn't mean don't build relationships with the men that are around you, because there are a lot of men that are extremely supportive and understand this, right? And then as mujeres, I think that we need to take it a step further in making sure that when we're raising our children, that we make our daughters aware of this and give them the tools they need to be strong in a man's world. And then also when we're raising our sons, right? What it is that they can do as men to be able to help their sisters out, and to make sure that they're fighting for equity for these women alongside them, right? So that, you know, it's equity, not one more than the other. We're not trying to get more than anybody else. It's just, we just want equity. So, you know, that's our role, and our role as women is very, very important, because we're raising our children, you know, and so the way that we model ourselves and what we teach them through those examples go a really, really long way. And hopefully, you know, through the generations, we can really make a more of a lasting impact. Jessica?
I mean, you guys said so much, and all of it almost, you know. I guess the only kind of two things that are coming to mind that I would add is that, you know, you stand in the truth, and you stand in your own, you have to ground yourself, right? Like in what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so for me, that's the law, and that's upholding the law. And so that's where I ground myself. And so everything that's like scary to do, because it's new when I was a newer lawyer, or because it's hard, because it takes a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, or because I'm going into some type of an arena where there's not a lot of people that look like me. I stand in that truth and that grounding of why I'm there. And then I would say that I also I try to be mindful that because others that are in that arena or that forum don't look like me, or haven't traditionally looked like me, doesn't mean that people like me or you or others, or even people that look different than me, shouldn't be in those spaces. So just because it's traditionally been occupied in a certain way really has nothing to do with my ability to be in that space, because I am there for a purpose and a reason. And I think that it's hard in the moment sometimes to take that space, but there's no reason when you're grounded and why you're doing it that you shouldn't take the space. And so I think that's what I would add to what's already been said. I mean, definitely, you know, very much need a way to have self-care, and that's goes for a lot of things, I think. So the other thing that I guess is coming to mind is like inspiration, you know. When I think about the uncomfortableness that I may have because something's different to me or I'm not used to it, I think about folks I'm working alongside and how different it is for them, or how much more different, you know. And we never want to like really judge who has it worse or anything like that, right? But I think what I'm coming to when I'm saying this is that like people show up, right? So they show up for themselves, they show up for justice. I can show up for myself, I can show up for justice, I can show up for others. And I think that's like a sentiment that we don't fully give enough context to is the idea of showing up. Oftentimes we think it has to be showing up in this like real structured, planned out, perfect, like different way. And I find that when it's something that's really hard, you know, just showing up for yourself, showing up for your community, showing up for justice, showing up for the law, you make it there, and then things kind of unfold as they need to. So don't take for granted, you know, showing up.
I just want to, that's beautiful. I just want to add one more thing for the women in here is, I think as women, we are taught to be people pleasers. And so, you know, we want people to say nice things about us, but sometimes we know how effective we're being by how much shit people talk about us. And so, I mean, at this point, me vale un cacahuate what people have to say about me, because if I'm doing what I know is right, like, good, you know, talk more shit. And as women, we need to have each other's back, because I think we're trained to kind of fight against each other for resources and kind of having a scarcity model in our head. And it's like, no, all my sisters can make it, and I hope they do, and I'm going to do everything I can to support them.
I love how you said that we've been trained to do that, because that isn't in our nature. It really, really isn't. But in this modern society where it's very individualistic, you know, we have been trained to be that way. And so part of decolonizing ourselves is going back to the original way in which we supported each other, and that we have love for everyone, because we have this understanding that we're all related and that we're all an extension of ourselves, right? Like in La Quech. So it's part of that decolonization process, which I feel has been a really big part of my own development, right? And which is why I continue to bring people into this space, because you know, there's so many people with amazing stories and amazing work that they're doing that I want to, you know, show them off to the world and expose them to all of my students, because it's amazing. It's not just about the work that I'm doing, it's the work that we're all doing, because we can't make any real progress unless we're doing it together. So, and I just love how everything came together for today's lecture, if you want to call it that, because it's International Women's Day, and I'm just like, oh yes, this is perfect. It's just perfect. So, you know, that was just the universe handling it, our grandmothers from the past handling it. So aquí estamos. But I want to open it up to the students again, y'all. If you have any other questions or something that you would want Ana Rosa to dive into a little bit deeper with regards to labor and labor rights, or the Green Deal, or anything else that has been touched on.
I just want to talk a little bit more about the H-2A question, because I got to organize H-2A guest workers in North Carolina, and it was the first time it was a state recognized union contract for all H-2A guest workers in North Carolina. And I was shocked by the conditions. I got to visit farm workers all over the state of North Carolina, and they were very close to what I imagined slavery conditions were like back in the day. In some places, there were refrigerators that had locks on them, so they could not get anything out unless the mayordomo allowed them to take what they were asking for out of the refrigerator. They couldn't go anywhere unless they were driven somewhere else by the mayordomo. So they were basically trapped in their labor camps, and were at the mercy of wherever the mayordomos were going to take them. There was actually one place that I went to where the grower was there waiting for me with a shotgun, and I told them, you know, if you want, I'll translate to you in English what I'm saying to your workers, but I'm not leaving until I tell them what their rights are. And so I did my whole spiel, and every single worker signed a union card that day. And I just like am so blessed that I got to experience that, because I knew it was bad, but I didn't know how bad until I had that experience of organizing H-2A guest workers in North Carolina. So yeah, our gente are still going through really hard times, and we just need to be there to have their backs and whatever they need.
Why do you think the mayordomos were acting that way? What were they so afraid of?
Probably afraid of them getting organized.
Have either of you seen similar conditions? I know that sounds pretty drastic in North Carolina, but have either of you seen similar, or what were the worst conditions maybe that you've come across here in California?
I don't know if you wanted to answer that or not, Jessica, but I've just seen really bad housing too, in different places, like where people just have tarps to live under. And so there's other farm worker housing organizations that I think are really important and valuable that are here in Ventura County. So also, like, when you hear they're up for their proposal or their project is up for voting by a city council, go turn up to that city council to support them, because farm workers need good, adequate housing, and a lot of times what's provided is very subpar. Yeah, like it's.
Do I hear the elotero in the background? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I'm like gonna rush out there as soon as we're done.
And then Tomas, thank you for being here with us today. Tomas Madrigal, somebody is asking or Jessica's asking, what is FWMA? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Dan Newhouse. This is my baby, Sorahaya. She likes my glasses. Dan Newhouse just introduced the Farm Worker Modernization Act again last week. And so there's a lot of farm workers that are confused about what the bill does, but it's basically going to legalize and expand the H-2A program. And so there's like the Farm Worker, the Food Chain Workers Alliance, for example, is going to launch a campaign against it tomorrow. But Farm Worker Justice and the United Farm Workers, because the UFW owns a labor trafficking organization called Cielo, are proponents of it. They're supporting it. And so there's a lot of confusing, I guess, language out there that's being disseminated by these groups. But I'm a part of an independent union effort with Familias Unidas por la Justicia and Trabajadores Unidos por la Justicia here in Washington. And our groups are definitely against this. And the Familias Unidas por la Justicia union, like the one that Ana was organizing, is also organizing H-2A workers. They're members of that union. And so there's a lot in there. And so we encourage you to look at that and to try educate yourself at least before you start to hear some of the back and forth.
I think it might be beneficial for students to get an understanding of why guest worker programs are bad. I know that they're worded in a way to make it seem like it's good, and there might be some positive aspects to that, but there's a lot of negative aspects to it. So if you wouldn't mind speaking to that a little bit, just to kind of make that the connection to what Tomas just shared as to why we want to organize to try to prevent this from happening. Ana Rosa.
Yeah, I mean, it's just very controlled labor, and that's what they like. They like to be able to control the workforces, and that's part of the dehumanizing language. And so we were kind of working with a messed up system to try to make it better by getting the H-2A guest workers some kind of union representation so that they're not so easily controlled and exploited. But it is a very harmful program.
All right, y'all, I just realized that we're at time. I wanted to have more questions, but we are at time. And so I want to take this time to wish everybody a very happy International Women's Day. If you are a mujer, if you are a woman, treat yourself to something nice today, connect with the other women in your lives today. And if you're not, make sure that you give your best wishes to the women that are around you, okay? Because we do need that extra support and love. And I just want to extend all of my love and support to each and every one of you, especially to my hermanas here, Jessica and Ana Rosa. Thank you for being amazing mujeres, an amazing example of what it is to be a chingona out there. Thank you so, so much for spending some time with us today and for sharing part of the work that you do. And oh my goodness, the work that y'all do is just tremendous. So thank you for that. And I would like to ask all of the students to please go ahead and unmute yourselves so that you can give your thanks and your goodbyes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
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 Thank you all.